Okay, well, hello. Welcome to the second lesson for the course of Android app development for beginners. Um, my name is Erwin. I will be the tutor during this course. And, well, this lesson, we saw some navigation, some fragments, how to work with lists, the recycle list, the beholder, those patterns that help developing a consistent UI, right? And from that point, we learned how to actually make use of the UI, how to make a good use of the resources that we have. We learned that recycler view is a better alternative to list view, because they don't load the whole list. You can add them programmatically, and we also learned a little bit about testing, Espresso, and how do we test for common use cases and stuff like that. But now, going on to the course, the lesson, I want to talk about the UI, how we can develop a good UI, how the UI is important. It's really very, very important topic for Android and for mobile in general, because, the interface, the screen is very small. We have limited resources, the touch controls are the main control way that we can access. And, the UI is, it can make or break an application, because a UI that is too bloated or too big for its own good will just drive people away from our application. And those are some design considerations that we have to take into account when developing our app. It doesn't matter if our app is really, really good. Maybe it's the best app that can work in the whole market, but if it's not easy to use, it will reach a very small market, a niche market. That won't be good, right? We don't want to actually, we want to reach as many people as we can. So for that purpose, I have actually made a presentation as we're going to go over. And this is a Android app developer for beginners lesson 2. Okay. As I said, the topic will be the UI, and we'll go over some topics I consider are very important. Today's topics we'll talk about, as I said, the importance of UI. Then we'll move on to some differences from activities and fragments, how they work, their differences, and some things that you can and you can't do with them. And finally, I will show you how to actually do efficient communication between fragments and activities the right way, because you can actually do a communication with an activity using intents and static functions, but that's not really a good way to do that, because since fragments are meant to be reusable, if you are using static functions, you will tie a fragment into an activity, and we really don't want it. Right? And then I will talk about the exercise for lesson 2, accessibility. This is a topic that you may think, well, that's really not important. Well, who cares if my app is accessible? But you know, you have to try to reach the biggest market that you can, and making apps accessible also helps with the design. Sometimes you will see in material design they have guidelines and whatnot to make a good UI, and in doing so, you will also be making an UI that, well, is really appealing and it works well. Okay, so let's talk about the importance of the UI. And there are 2 points that I'll cover in this presentation. Those being the UI on mobile, and then, well, the main ways we can interact with the UI in mobile, being buttons, actions, menus, and you know, the navigation drawer, the toolbar, and the button navigation, those kind of things. So the UI in mobile. The UI in mobile is really the first thing that a user sees. They open an application and screen of the application, and there's this UI right there. Like sometimes it's a login screen, sometimes it takes you directly to the main page. Like if you have used, I'm pretty sure most of you guys use YouTube and Gmail. Well, you see those UIs are very clean. They have like one navigation bar and one floating action button, and mostly that's it. Maybe they have a navigation drawer on the side, but well, other than that, there is like no other stuff. It's really clean, it's simple, and it's effective. Those are really important things. If you guys have seen websites, well, websites from many years ago when mobile wasn't such a big thing, you'll see that they had this big side navigation. They have a top navigation and maybe even a second side navigation on the other side of the screen. Like if you go to YouTube, you can see that they still have the navigation and the toolbar on top, but those things are made in a way to resemble the mobile UI, and they actually fit to the screen. They hide and whatnot when the screen is smaller. Well, when seeing in full size, that's the way most websites, and that doesn't work for mobile. There's simply no space. That's why they must be clean. I mean, of course, you can use a tablet and you have this huge screen and it doesn't really matter, but a mobile phone doesn't have the space to actually, well, to actually display all that. And of course, being touchscreen, you don't have a mouse or a keyboard, so whenever you want to type something, the keyboard takes more space on screen. It's just, well, a big problem. Now, buttons, actions, and menus. This is the main way we interact with the screen with our applications. And buttons, well, you know, the square buttons that you see on many forums or websites and whatnot. And there's also the floating action buttons, as you may know, that are just, you know, floating on the screen. And, well, then there are the navigation drawer and the toolbar. The toolbar is the top, well, bar on a screen where, well, mostly you see the name of the application on most basic applications, but you can also add a search bar or that's from where you can open a navigation drawer, a settings menu, so many kind of things. Then, of course, the navigation drawer, you will see that in use in the application of this lesson. You see it's a menu that is mostly hidden front view, where you post most of your settings and options and whatnot. Things that are not really fundamental or important to the functioning of the application or the activity in this case, they go there because you still have to put them somewhere. Well, then the toolbar and the floating action button will show simple options, right? As I said, and the navigation holds all the other. They are hidden because, of course, mobile don't have the space. On tablets, they can be shown all the time if there is no use for the extra space, but that's that's for that's in a case-by-case basis, right? The actions shown here must be like really clear. You must know what you're doing when you want to click the button. Like you see on Gmail, you see the little thing, and you know that button is used to write a new email. That's why most of them use icons. You will be trying and searching a lot. You want to see an Android application that uses a lot of text instead of icons, because that's really not the way to develop stuff on mobile. Well, it may work if you use extra icons or visual aids. It's really more simple to use icons instead. And, if you select the correct icon, the user may already know what to do, what the app will do and whatnot. Okay, so now let's go a little bit off topic. And let's talk about the navigation. You know how to navigate in your application when you are using activities. Well, you want to start another activity and you use an intent and call that activity, right? Or if you're using a fragment, well, multiple fragments in one activity, as you will see in the lesson app, you can use a fragment manager and move and replace fragments however you see fit. Navigation between fragments and activities, it's a little bit more complicated, and that you see. And another important thing when talking about navigation is that activity can have its own navigation, like a drawer or a bottom navigation like you can see here. This is a screenshot from the YouTube application. And the thing is that when you use the YouTube application, you always see the toolbar, right? And the navigation drawer. No, excuse me, the bottom navigation. And when you go into a channel, you also see tabs that you can navigate through a channel, through their videos, to their playlists and whatnot. And you see, here's the thing, they are different things. The application has the top and the bottom. And that means that they have, well, the activity has the bottom navigation and the toolbar, right? And then the fragment inside has its own navigation. And you can mix and match that kind of stuff. Like you can see here to make the UI however you want it to make. Now, with that out of the way, let's retake the topic I was talking before, explaining how a fragment can have a different navigation, and that is a bit of communication in activities and fragments. I also want to talk about similarities, how can you use them, where should you use them, and whatnot, a comparison between them so you can see that they're very similar. And that was the purpose of the fragment, right? To make something similar to an activity, but lighter and easier to reuse and replace. But in concept, they are very, very similar. Then a couple of advantages and disadvantages about using fragments. And finally, the thing I was introducing before I talk about that communication. Well, similarities. Both activities and fragments can actually interact with the UI. They can handle UI inputs, they can display elements, and each of them has a life cycle. Activities are really more complex than fragments. That's a given, right? But fragments also have their own life cycle when they are attached, when they can be seen, when they are hidden, when they are removed, and when they are destroyed. You can see that in the Android developer website if you are interested in that kind of thing. The UI inputs, like a fragment can receive the inputs. Like if a fragment is displaying a list, it knows when an item is selected. And you can also do that with an activity, right? And of course, displaying elements, it's very basic and it's kind of a given. Now a bit of a comparison. Activities are self-contained, they can live on their own, they have their own resources. And when you create an activity, it doesn't really depend on anything else, like, of course, the application, but an activity state, an activity resources and whatnot doesn't depend on another activity, right? They have their own sets and they have their own things. An activity communicates to another activity via an intent. Well, you can use a global variables, share preferences, all that good stuff, but the most basic way is you use an intent, well, as well, to actually call another activity, or you could broadcast that intent. We already saw how to do that, right? You send an intent with some data, and another activity can receive that data. That's the general gist of communication between activities. Activities are meant to be like one screen. They are one thing, and they have one purpose, right? Like a main screen or a detail screen. They are one thing. And this is really important, and many beginners have this error where you always have to declare a new activity in the manifest. Otherwise, it will not work. Whenever you try to open that activity, it will crash the application. Now, now that we understand how activities work, let's take a look at the fragments. Fragment is contained within an activity, right? A fragment doesn't do anything until it's attached to an activity. a fragment doesn't have a context of its own, and it doesn't have a lot of the resources that an activity has. Instead, it's kind of like added to an activity. I mean fragments, they have a kind of interesting way of communicating with other activities and with our fragments. When it comes to an activity, of course, you can just send the intent like it's another regular activity, but from a fragment. But what happens when, like, imagine you have an activity that has two fragments, right? There are different kinds of lists. Like in the movie manager, you can see the now playing list and the upcoming. Those two are fragments on the same activity. But how do you communicate between a fragment and another fragment? The only thing that they have in common is the host activity. And the host activity has two fragments. So you have to actually use an interface and use callbacks to handle how the communication between those two work. Between an interface, the interface handles how the activity sees what the fragment wanted to see. Like in an interface, is where you send data to an activity from a fragment, and in a callback, you receive data back from the activity. I'll show this a little bit more detail later. But for now, let's continue. A fragment is a small piece of a screen. And that means that it's not designed as the activity, as if an activity is the whole thing, right? It includes menus, lists, images, items. A fragment may just be a single list or a single image. And that's the main advantage they have, right? They are reusable and they're very little. They have one purpose. Like if a fragment purpose is to display a list, you can use the same adapter, the same beholder, the same list, and just change the content, like send content to a fragment, and it will handle it the same way. And a fragment doesn't have to be declared on the manifest because it will always be an activity, right? And the activity is already declared in the manifest. So they don't have to be declared like an activity. So now, advantages and disadvantages. Well, many of the advantages and disadvantages are, of course, tied to what makes a fragment. Reusable, small, they are a simple purpose. And of course, one of the greatest advantages that this shows is that it allows a modular development. Instead of having one single activity that has like 30 functions, you can make a fragment, or a couple of fragments that maybe they have 2 or 3 functions each. So you don't have to like go trying to find in all the code the pieces that are working and or not working, how they interact and whatnot. It's a really big problem. And disadvantages, of course, they have their own life cycle. So, like, not only they are tied to an activity life cycle. Like, if an activity is killed, all its fragments are killed. But they also have their own stuff, like what to do when they are attached, when they are shown, and many other stuffs. Of course, you should actually watch read the developer website, so you know how the fragments lifecycle works. We already did an activity on the lifecycle of an activity, right? So they work kind of like that, but it's like a double layer lifecycle. Then you know that if you are switching between activities, you will see that an activity, when you press the back button, you return to the last activity, right? Fragments don't work that way. They simply don't. If you want to press back and return to the fragment, you actually have to do the back step yourself. It's really not that complicated, but it's an important consideration. Sometimes, if you aren't careful, how are you attaching and displaying data on a fragment? When maybe you're displaying a list fragment in an activity, right? And it looks really cool. And then you go to another activity and you finish what you're doing there. You press back. And suddenly the activity and the fragment, they are blank. They have no data. That's one of the problems of the backstack. Well, more accurately, the lack of a backstack. The communication between fragments is not straightforward as between activities, right? You saw, or you'll see, you have to use callbacks and interfaces. And that's the correct way to actually communicate a fragment with another fragment in the same activity. And of course, they don't only have their own activity life cycle, but they have to worry about the activity life cycle. And here I added a Gmail. I'm sure most know about Gmail. And how I want to show how you can use fragments to create an UI. And what better way to do that than showing you an application made by the guys who are developing Android, right? You see, this is the main screen of Gmail, right? Where you see your inbox. And you see the emails, you see promotions, and you see the little floating action button. Then you slide from the left or press the button on the top left. You can open the navigation router. It's kind of a menu. But if you instead select an email, you'll be taken to that email video, right? You may not be surprised to know that this tree can work as one single screen, because if you have used Gmail on a computer or on a tablet, you already know what I'm talking about. Here's how it looks on a tablet. You can see on the left side, there's this small strip. It's kind of a smaller menu, right, with the most important parts of the menu. Then right in the middle, you see the inbox, and on the right, you see the detail. And these three things are combined from the last thing that we saw. They use those fragments to display as single screens, and here they are shown as one big screen. And that was the thing about modular development, that you can have small fragments that handle one simple purpose, right? One fragment shows the inbox and another shows the detail. Imagine if you wanted to do this or the tablets display, but using only activities. You have a lot, and I mean a lot of a lot of extra stuff and a lot of functions and whatnot to actually select and display the correct item. And then you have to redo that work for the mobile phone. So using fragments is much more simple. And now then, fragments communication. This is what I've been talking about, the interfaces and the callbacks. It's really simple, and this example is on the Android developer website. You can check that out. And you can try it yourself, right? That's the best way to learn how to program. How to develop an app, you have to try it out yourself. You don't become an expert by watching videos and reading documentation. When you want to send data from activity to another, you use an intent. It's the most basic way to do that, and it works really well. But what do you do between fragments? I already gave you guys the answer before. You use an interface and a callback, right? Especially between fragments, they have to communicate through the host activity. You can't start the fragment from an intent. Like, you technically can. You could make an intent on the same activity with a parameter that tells the activity to call a fragment. But there you are putting a stop to the activity and you are creating a new one, and it has to the process of creating the activity, starting the context, then loading the fragment. It's really not effective. So you have to actually use interfaces. They're much more simple. And this is how you do the communication. This is what you will do in the fragment. Remember, this code is in the developer website. You can check that out. And you see, the first thing you'll notice is that it has a variable named callback. And that variable is used to receive data back from the activity. And then you see the interface that it has one simple function. Then it comes the onAttach method. This is called when a fragment is attached to an activity. Like when you replace a fragment, when you add the other fragment, there it's when this is called, right? It's attached to the activity. It's not shown yet, but because there's a onShow function that does that. But the thing is that this is important because you have to check that the activity actually implements our function, because that's how we communicate. If the activity doesn't know how to communicate back to the fragment, we throw an error, right? And then all the way on the bottom, you see the onList item click. And this, the only thing that it does, it's called the implementation of the function that was done on the main activity. This is very simple, and this is how you manage your fragments. And this is the code from the activity side. It's much more simple. You just add the implement, and you add the implementation. You add the small function. This can do whatever you want it to do, right? In this example, the fragment is displaying a list, and the onArticle selected, you actually may want to do something with that article. Maybe you want to see the news in detail, or save the news to your favorites, or something like that. You can do that here. No. Between fragments and activities, there are do's and don'ts, and you may be wondering, what can I do with some, and what can I do with the other? The thing is that they are practically the same. You can do the same kind of apps using fragments and using activities. It may be more complicated or more simple depending on your approach, but you can do the exact same things. But one way I like to actually choose what to use, whether it's an activity or a fragment, is you want to group activities and fragments that share a certain purpose. Like if you are having like in the lesson app, right? You see the upcoming and the no playing fragments are are in the same activity. That's because the activity is meant to hold those fragments, right? And they share that kind of same purpose. And then that activity communicates with the DRL activity that has another purpose. And that's the way I like to select how I'll be working with a fragment or an activity. And we will actually recommend that you use fragments for everything, but I find that kind of, wasteful. If you're using a single screen, then you really don't have to make a fragment because they'll be just be adding code to the mix. I just feel it's an unnecessary complication. And this is how what I was saying before. You have two activities that may have different purposes, right? They may share data some way or another. And each activity has their own set of fragments. Fragments that they know how to work and they know what they do and they can interact with them. Well, they are all similar in purpose, right? And now to close the presentation, I'll talk a little bit about this exercise. You might be thinking this exercise is extremely simple, and it is. Not because it's simple, it's not important. It's actually very important on design to know when your app is accessible or when it's not. The important points of this lesson are, I think there are 3 points: the content descriptors, the touch size, and the colors. The colors, aren't really a part of the exercise, but I think it's an important topic when we're talking about accessibility. So, a content descriptor. What is a content descriptor? It's used to give information about an item. It may be a button or an image. Right? This is mostly used with accessibility features with text to speech. Right? Many users that have poor eyesight can use this to navigate their phones or have lots of, they can use most of the apps that the large majority of us can't because text-to-speech allows them to navigate through them. And it's important that you use meaningful descriptions, right? Like if you're showing an image, and it's showing how to actually imagine making a new post. You can't just post a description that says how to make a new post. You should actually use a description that says to make a new post, you can select this button and whatnot. It should be meaningful. It shouldn't be just like image 1 and that's it. That's really worthless and not useful in any sort of way. Setting a content descriptor using the XML method is useful when you're working with resources you have beforehand. Items like images and icons, like you add a content descriptor to a new email button, well, that's because you know it's going to make a new email. But using use the set content descriptor method in Java code is useful for text views and edit views and stuff that might be changing with the user input or when selecting stuff, right? Like if you have a text box that says select a username, you type a username, but then the content descriptor just may say the username or just literally username. That might not be, well, it's better than nothing, right? But a better content descriptor will be actually just to say to the user, the username you selected is, and then add the username they selected. And that's more meaningful and more useful content descriptor. Size. In the exercise, you were asked to think about a large device, right? If an icon is too small, it's no use in a large device. But you also have to think about small devices. If an icon is too large for a small device, then it will cover too much space and it will not be attractive and may not even be useful. Of course, the material.io page has a lot of guidelines and whatnot to help you actually do this. For small screens, they actually recommend a 40 times 40 size for a button. But the best way to be sure if you're really worried about layouts and sizes is to test in as many devices as possible. The way I like to test sizes is I have a small device, a large or medium device, and a tablet. That way I can cover all the sizes, important sizes. Of course, there are too many to cover, but if you cover the general gist of them, you probably be fine. And finally, color. Color is a really important thing about an app. A color scheme can give your app an identity. Like Gmail and YouTube use white and red color schemes. Imagine if suddenly YouTube is blue, it will be really weird, right? But other than that, when considering accessibility, using a text color and a background color, they may clash, and they may sometimes even be unreadable. And sometimes even if your colors are too similar, it will be confusing, right? Maybe the divisions aren't showing right, or the type of items aren't getting mixed up right. Well, of course, Google has a solution for that. And they have this, the material color tool. It's on the material.io website. And this tool shows you how a color combination may look on a screen. They also select dark and lighter colors. They tell you how your text may look, if they are readable or not. Like so. I selected here this purple color, and then they show you on the left side. Well, you see user interface and accessibility. The one we care about here is accessibility. It shows you right there that the text, the white text is readable, right? with maybe some difficulty regarding the screen brightness, but it works. But the black text is not. And that's the important part about this website. To help you design an UI that uses the best colors possible. Of course, you may also look look up the color wheel. There's a lot of interesting studies about the color wheel and how some colors complement or contrast each other. You can, of course, put this into this tool, and it will show you the best fonts to use in each one. Then, if you are following material design, you might be searching for icons. Like, you can't use the system icons because they'll clash. They are not simple. They are not like material. So of course they have icons, and you can go there, download their zip, add them to your project. But then, of course, there's a tool for that. This one is called the Android Material Design Icon Generator plugin. It's a plugin. You search it up with that exact name, and it will show up a GitHub repository. You can follow the instruction there, install it in Android Studio, and then you can download icons directly from Android Studio without having to go to the page, search for an icon, and download it, then add it to the project and update it. This makes it much easier. But be careful. Material design is really useful. It's a great design philosophy, but don't try to follow it to the point. Yeah, it will lead to a lot of headaches and a lot of problems. I mean, there's a lot to be done when you're measuring pixels and distances, colors, icons. Follow the guides, but don't let it become like the central part of the application, because then it will be like you'll put too much focus on the design and not enough on the application. And a reason that I say don't follow it exactly is because you should design the application to fit its own needs and not follow the guidelines. Not follow the guidelines to the T, right? Check this out. This is a screenshot from the Google Maps, right? You see the toolbar, the navigation, the buttons, but there is something wrong here. It doesn't follow material design, and it's a Google app. And why it doesn't follow material design? Well, because it has 3 floating action buttons. Material design says that you should only use 1. Of course, mini floating action buttons are a different thing, but they still use 3. So you don't have to follow exactly material design. It's a great guide. It's a great place to start. And they show great ways to design the UI, right? But actually, you design the UI to fit the application needs. You need a button or 2 extra to make the app more usable or more intuitive. Go ahead. Just don't add like a row of buttons, because that would be pointless. It will be really confusing. There are various ways to do that. Menus, drop-down items. You actually can make that when pressing a button, it shows new options. I'm sure you have seen that sometimes. It is a really useful technique. Well, guys, that will be for lesson 2. Of course, any questions you can always contact us in the forums. We'll try to answer well, as quickly as possible and help with everything you know. If you guys have a topic in mind for a presentation that you may want to cover, let us know. And we will make, of course, we'll add that and try to make the best experience for this kind of presentation. And well, take care. I hope you guys learned something. I hope you guys continue with the course. It's a really interesting course. Designing mobile apps, a really interesting topic. Well, that's all for today, guys. Have a nice week, and I'll see you on the next presentation.